this Sistine Chapel was the rebuild of the so-called Sistine Chapel.
Paid
I
for
don't
by
even know whether
Medici.
it's a rebuild or something was by Medici families.
If memory serves me correctly from my art history, it was originally a Roman foundation, a
Right.
building which was partially destroyed and then rebuilt.
That's right.
And then they painted the interior. Leonardo got the contract for the
Sure.
Last Supper on one wall, and then
Yeah.
then there's another building, which is the other most famous one, which has Leonardo da Vinci's magnificent paintings all over
Sure.
its walls, including the ceiling, where you get that
Yeah.
famous scene of God touching
That's
the
right.
finger of man.
That's right.
And all of that, as you say, costs a
Mhm.
lot of money.
Oh
and
yeah.
and the Medicis are bankrolling the Vatican. Now, what does that mean? Who's in control?
The bankers.
Exactly.
That's right. And then the Medici's morph into the Fuggers,
Yes.
and the Fuggers ended up having ties with the Habsburg family, from what
Yes.
I understand. Habsburg sort of controls. I don't know to what depths they have control over the European side of the banking system, but of course they do have some sort of close ties with to that with the Rothschilds.
Well, one thing I wanted to just go backwards a little bit.
Yes, please.
Point your finger at one thing, and that is, you notice how
Yes,
the major finances is in
right.
Italy. Now,
That's right.
what was in Italy previous? The Roman Empire.
That's right.
That was where all the money and gold from all over Europe and their empire was
Mhm.
collected in Italy.
That's right. That's
So
right.
there was a transition period, which we call the Dark Age, where the fall of the Roman
Right.
Empire. But if you're a rich guy, what do? You stash your wealth, you hide it,
That's right.
maybe on an
That's right.
island. How about Sardinia?
Hmm.
How about one of those other islands where you're not going to be invaded by the Huns or by the
Hmm.
Visigoths or
Right.
somebody? And then, after a couple generations, because
Sure.
remember these are families, so they
That's
keep
right.
they keep their integrity in multi generational projects, right?
Of course.
And
Yeah.
then you just come back at the right time, maybe around the 12th or 13th centuries, and
Hmm.
then you've got the
Start your
all that.
family and revive your family business all over again.
Exactly, and you're no longer called the Neros or the Roman names. You're just a different a wolf
That's
in a
right.
different sheep's clothing.
Correct.
And then all of that wealth and all of that power can be used to do what you want. Because remember, no
Sure.
king can be a king for very long
That's
without
right.
an army, and an army needs weapons, and those have to be made in workshops, and
Right.
somebody has to pay for all of that. And a bunch of peasants with
Right.
pitchforks ain't going to do it for you, man.
Oh yeah.
You need swords, you need shields, you need armor, you
Sure.
need arrows, you need bows. These
That's
things
right.
cost a fortune, and there's no way anybody's going to do anything without the finances to do that. And we're not talking
Correct.
about normal feudal economy. Normal
Correct.
feudal economy doesn't require money.
Yep.
It's just agricultural based, and it's based on
That's right.
barter. Like I'll trade you a sack of wheat for a new pair of shoes, right?
That's right.
But that doesn't work very well with armaments production.
Hmm. Hmm.
Where's the knight going to get the bag of wheat? He's not a farmer.
That's right.
Where's the king going to get
Right.
an army of well equipped soldiers? He's going to have to. What he's going to have to do is he's going to have to tax, and then he's going to have to get. And remember, these people don't have money; they don't have gold; they only have food. So they're going to have to sell that food in some kind of market, and you're going to have to do some international trade, and then there's going to have to be a merchant with some gold somewhere that you're going to
Yeah.
have to get a hold of, either by trade or by loan, and
Right.
then you can become your king of the kingdom
Hmm.
and beat all the
Hmm.
other guys.
Right.
So that's the basis of the financial system, isn't it?
Hmm. Hmm. Hey, say, got a question for you in regards to the England's history, the history of England.
I'll try my best.
Uh, was it like I haven't put too much effort into reading backwards and studying backwards, like on
Yeah.
that part, but uh, my question for you is that when did the let's see. The current English monarch came from the family line from Germany.
Yes.
What's it called
Uh, the
again?
the uh, the German name is
Uh,
Gotha. The actual
yes,
German name
yes,
is Gotha, and then there's the last part.
right, right,
Slips
right.
my mind at the moment, but they're
Sure,
definitely
sure, that's
German.
okay. Yeah, it skips my mind too. I used to be able to spill it out relatively quickly.
Yeah, but you know that
Have some
the
kind of yeah,
I'll go back to what you're really
some kind of Golta, whatever.
yeah what you're
Right. Is
really
it?
talking about though is where England lost control over its
Yes.
monarchy
Correct.
from a local generated one into a foreign
Y-
influenced one, and
Exactly. That is my
that's what you want to
question.
know,
Yeah,
right?
because I think that was the end of the Tudor dynasty.
Yes, and
And
it's get
something somehow took possession of that
yes,
and became a German part, right? Of
yes,
course, the Queen of Victoria consort, Prince Albert is actually from that same
yes, that's correct.
family line too, right?
Yes, I'll
Golta,
tell you, man, that is one of the most complicated things in human history to figure out
right?
the complex origins of and the transitions of the royal families
Yes,
in
right.
England.
That's
In
right.
the other European countries, it's also pretty bad, but it's
Yep.
much simpler. And the
Right, right,
problem is that the English were so warlike and they were
right.
so violent towards each other, and they were a competition for control
Sure.
over the monarchy. And remember that England was not exactly unified. There
Yep.
were kingdoms in Wales, there were kingdoms in
That's right.
Scotland, there were kingdoms
There's
in the
all,
south.
yeah, the kingdoms in Scotland,
Yes,
there's Mary of Scotland and so
yes,
on, always fighting one
that's
another.
right.
They all,
And
right.
after the fall of the Roman Empire, which approximately the Roman fleet left England in I think it was 415.
Yes,
From the fall of that until the reorganization of England under one supreme king. And some people
sure.
say that that didn't take place until the advent of King John. And I think
Right.
King John is around the 9th or 10th century.
Correct.
And that's 500, 400 years later. Okay. And
Hmm.
then there's the Crusade. And the first Crusade, which was in 1089 or something like that,
Roughly 1100,
yeah, I'm
yeah.
gonna have to make a long list of corrections at
That's okay.
about
Yeah,
all
yeah.
my
I
dates.
don't remember exactly the
Yeah, but
numbers.
the point is, he was killed or maybe survived the first crusade. But
Right.
while he was away, there was a lot of fighting again for his throne. But what it all boiled down to was the War of the Roses. And the
Mm,
War of the Roses took place in around 1380, 1390, 1410, and it lasted a long time. It lasted like 100 years. And
oh, wow.
it was a battle basically between the people who were English
Right.
and the people who were from the continent, from France. Because remember,
Hmm.
England was invaded and taken over by the French, by the Normans in 1066. Okay,
Correct.
Norman the
Yeah,
Conqueror, and of
that's right.
course, ever since then, the British were extremely upset and didn't
That's
want
right.
to have their country ruled by foreigners. Now,
Hmm.
unfortunately, they couldn't do anything about it. The Saxons were weak and the Normans were strong, and they
Hmm.
controlled the place for hundreds of years. But
Right.
there was always this underground movement. It's kind of like the Ming Dynasty never wanting to go away, you know?
Hmm. Right.
always trying to come back. So they were like the Robin Hoods, the criminals,
That's right.
the people who
Yeah.
were always, doing something to undermine the Norman rule. Because
Right. Right.
that's what the Robin Hood story is really all about. It's
Hmm.
about the common English people resisting the taxation and the rule of the Normans. Okay.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
anyhow, the point here is in my long-winded story is that the War of the Roses was an attempt through these two houses, the Lancasters and
Hmm.
the oh geez, can't remember their name off the top of my head, but it's
Hmm.
basically the Tudors. Okay,
Right. Right.
and the
That's
Tudors
right.
are got help from their friends in Europe, from their family
Right.
members in places like Germany and stuff. Because remember,
Sure.
royal
Yeah.
families are extremely cosmopolitan. In
Hmm.
feudal society, you don't go more than 10 kilometers from where you were born. Okay,
Right.
you don't move around. You don't. You might marry someone from the next village. That's about it,
Right.
right?
Right.
But the monarchs, totally different. They are at a higher level, and they're marrying girls from kingdoms thousands of kilometers away.
That's right.
The King of
Yeah.
England marries the Princess of Denmark, or whatever it is,
Right.
and they've got these family connections, these family structures going far beyond anything that normal people have.
Sure.
So in this War of the Roses, which was many people say was the real struggle for the control of England,
Sure.
the Europeans and their friends, which included the Gotha.
Right.
Can't pronounce the rest of it.
And
And
Saxburg Gotha.
Saxburg, yeah, that's it. Saxburg Gotha and their relatives were financing, because remember, it's all down to money. Who's going to buy the shields and the swords? They were financing the defense against a English revival movement, an independence movement. The people of England tried to gain back control over their country and take it away from these foreigners, these Normans and their European friends, and they failed. They failed, and the battle, the final battle for that, was in this famous Shakespeare play, Henry III.
Right.
And where Henry III, of course, is portrayed as a villain, as a
Sure.
hunchback, as a mutant, who is crying, "My kingdom for a horse," right?
Right.
And it recounts the battle of, that might come to me too, the name of that battle.
Don't worry.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
the point
I just
is,
want to know, like, because that pilot,
Gosworth,
I
Gosworth
have
Field.
voids all over the place.
Yeah,
Right?
Battle of Bosworth Field. That's it.
Right.
And that's the final battle of the end of the War of the Roses, where the English usurpers, the ones that are trying to get back their kingdom, represented by Henry III, get wiped out, and the Tudors come along, take his crown, and you notice that the history is always written by the winners.
Yes, of course.
That's not a good thing. The Tudors were foreigners. They were related to the European royal families. Henry III is a hero. He was the guy standing up for English independence, and he's portrayed in history as a hunchback, a mutant, an evil guy, and all this stuff. But it's because the victors rewrite the history books.
Right.
And ever since then, the control of England has been in foreign hands.
Foreign hands. Right.
And with intermarriage and so on, and of course it got to the point where it was even the foreigners fighting the foreigners with Henry VIII, who is he's going against the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church was the foreign control, because remember, the Normans brought Christianity to England.
Right.
Christianity was always in Ireland, but in England itself, that was not the kind of Christianity that the English practiced. They were Saxon people who had a different concept of what Christianity was. I wouldn't say it was it was not Christianity. It was a different concept. It was not with the leadership from Rome. Certainly not.
Right.
It was not the Pope. No way. It was more like the Holy Grail quest for purity, chivalry, and the blood of Christ, and the spiritual side of Christianity. And that was all lost when the Normans conquered England. So there's a religious aspect there as well. A religious political control aspect.
Right.
I'm jumping around a bit here, but then
That's
you
fine,
you get to
I'm following, no problem.
you get to the 19th century with Queen Victoria the First, right?
Right. Right.
And all of her children are basically intermarrying with people in other countries,
That's right.
and to the point where by the time World War I starts in 1914,
Right.
it's cousins fighting cousins.
Correct.
You've got King George V of England. He's cousins with Tsar Nicholas II of Russia, and they're both cousins with Kaiser Wilhelm in Germany.
Correct. And then there's the
And then there's the
Austro-Hungarian Duke.
they're all related. The
Ferdinand,
yeah,
whatever.
they're all
He's
related.
also blood related.
I think he
yes.
was some kind of uncle to somebody.
That's right.
And then,
Exactly.
and then, of course, all of these people are related to Queen Victoria. So it's absolutely ridiculous. You'd think that a family couldn't get together and stop the war. Of course they could have.
Oh,
You
well.
know, it's nonsense. So what's going on here is that the origin, like back to your original point, the origin of money control
Right.
is all about war control.
That's right.
Let's have a
That's right.
war. Wars are expensive.
It's also war is expensive, and war is the way that the banks, they money controlling
yeah,
families from Medici, subsequently to the Fuggers,
yep,
to Rothschilds, and so on and so forth. They all gain control and
yep.
dominance over the situation because regardless, they funded both sides, right?
Well, you have to
Just
do that
right now, they're funding both sides too,
because you don't care who
like
wins.
all these so-called, truthers movement,
Hmm.
orange man movements, boots and so on, they're
Yep.
also funded by the bad guys. So hey,
Yeah. Well, look, if you funded both sides, it just means you get contracts whoever wins or whoever loses.
That's right.
You get contracts
That's
to
right.
rebuild the broken country, and you get
That's
contracts to
right.
rearm them so that they can get their revenge in the next war.
That's
And
right.
that's good for
That's right.
business.
It's
And
kind of like
then,
casino. Some of those gambling tables, the house
of
always
course,
wins.
the house always wins. And you know what? War also
Right.
has a dual purpose. It keeps those at war constantly poor.
That's right.
It's very hard to win a war and come out rich
Correct.
in the modern sense because the only way you can do that is if you go and plunder your enemy. And if he
Right.
doesn't have
Right.
anything left because he's spent all his resources on fighting you, well, you're not going to get much
That's
plunder.
right.
So
That's right.
it's kind of hard to come out on top. You're usually so exhausted or depleted, or you've lost your
That
knights or
that
something.
is that is a very good observation, Tim.
Yeah,
A
huh?
good phenomena that if I'm to extend on that a little bit to what's happening right now, which
Uh-huh.
I loosely nickname as World War III, also known as Info War,
Yes.
the good versus the bad.
Yep.
The fact is, this time round, they weren't successful in bankrupting us, the middle class.
There's been a lot of talk about
Right.
what we call alternative battlefields.
Correct.
For example, the so-called epidemic.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, please.
Now, it's is it coincidental that the same thing took place towards the end of World War One? Is it coincidental that it would be inflicted on the stronger powers? That most of the
Right,
people in the Allied countries were getting the influenza? Isn't that
right.
strange? It was mostly America, England, Canada, places like that. What's going on there? In other words, there's always something to make sure that nobody comes out on top, that they're
Mm-hmm,
always at each other's throats, always
mm-hmm,
preparing for the next one.
mm-hmm.
Anybody who has a brain can see that World War II took place exactly 20 years after World War One, because that's how long it takes to grow a soldier.
Right.
Get it?
And put them into service again.
Exactly. It takes 20 years to get a new crop
That's
for
right.
the
That's
for
right.
for the for the Grim Reaper's harvest.
Sure.
You
Sure.
see, and this is what's been supposedly been going on for thousands of years, and in one form or another. You could call it a revolution. You could call it
Right.
a plague. You could call it whatever you want. There has to be the Grim Reaper at work in order to keep our masters on top and us
Sure.
compliant sheep working in the fields and providing our
Correct.
wool or our mutton.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So that's the system. Now, right now, what are we seeing in the world? Well, things don't seem to be going like normal. Like
Oh,
there should be like a whole war going on right now in Europe,
correct.
but it's not really
Correct.
happening.
It's not happening.
No,
It's not happening, just like the original pandemics.
that didn't
They
work
tried to
out.
lock us down completely for
Hmm.
5 to 7 years,
Yeah. So they resorted
driving
to
us
they
crazy.
resorted to economic warfare, knocking out pipelines, putting people in the dark and freezing them and
That's right.
things like
That's
that,
right.
or trying to kill us with food prices or inflation.
Correct.
But none of this
Correct.
is creating the kind of massive disasters that they're used to in the past.
Yes.
In the past, there would be things like artificially created potato famines, where millions of people would have to
Right.
leave the
Correct.
land, and then, of course, the
Of course.
banksters could move in and buy up prime castles and acreage in Ireland
That's right.
at
That's
pennies on the
right.
dollar. See, that's
That's
what it's
right.
all about. You make people.
Would you agree that by the end of the 1920s, the great economic collapse in United
Hmm.
States was also led by the cabals or
There's
triggered by the
there's
cabals?
absolutely nothing that ever goes on in history that hasn't been triggered by the cabals. And you have to
Right.
think of it like this. And I know this is hard to do, it's hard for me to do. You have to
Sure.
think of
Sure.
our earth and our civilizations and our peoples as a farm.
Yes.
Okay? Now, you can't just come along and kill all your animals on your farm.
Correct.
You have to fatten them up.
That's right.
Okay? And in order to do that, you need periods of prosperity.
Yeah.
Right? You need economic activity where everybody's happy, having a
Right.
good time, building their wealth.
Right. That's
That's
right.
just fattening up the herd.
Right.
And then when they're ready for the slaughter, you
Right.
organize a war,
Yeah.
a financial collapse in order to
That's
maybe
right.
set the seeds for the desperation of a war. You
Correct.
know, there's many financial and psychological control mechanisms that are put into play in order to get people
Sure.
at each other's throats.
That's right.
And there's psychological factors as well, and it's not just
Correct.
one thing. The
Correct.
playbook is complex because it's been
Yes.
in play for so long.
That's right.
They'll do anything from racism to
Correct.
homophobia to well, everything that you see
Hmm.
in this world that's evil, that's destructive,
Hmm.
that's divisive, that's putting people in controversy with each other. It's
Hmm.
all artificial. It's all
That's
programmed.
right.
It's all done by design, and,
That's right.
it's because we are being harvested
Correct.
by these methods.
Correct. Correct. So this time around, I'm looking from very many different angles and many different perspectives. And
Yes.
the way I see it, of course, is a continuation of the ongoing investigation and the improvements in my or our understandings. Uh, you know, like this time around, what makes it so unique is that the war is in a high. It's well hidden, and it's mainly fought as a form of information war. But because it's information
Uh huh.
war, this time around the cabal, it's somewhat beyond their playbook, and the outcome is not what they came to expect. Yeah,
Have you noticed the constant economic shakedown?
that's right.
They're trying to get billions and billions for Ukraine.
That's right.
Now,
Well, Ukraine is just a puppet show, right? It's
absolutely.
they just put Zelensky, the actor, as a front man to generate those to get those money.
Let's get down
Like
and
now, he
dirty.
says he's going to join what should we call NATO and something like
Let's
that.
get
It's
down and
like,
dirty and talk about a specific scenario that we normally never do. We normally just
oh
talk
yeah,
about,
sure,
idealistic situations. But
that's
in the
right.
case of Ukraine, you can see something there that
Hmm.
should be obvious to anyone with half a mind. And that
That's right.
is that there's countless billions and billions of dollars going into Ukraine, but the Ukrainian people are not getting it. The Ukrainian
Correct.
people are not benefiting. What
That's
it's
right.
going to finance arms that come from where? From the Ukraine? No. Those arms come from the countries that are begging their people for the money.
That's right.
So the money's going to them,
That's
not
right.
the Ukraine. But the arms are going to the Ukraine, and then they immediately get destroyed.
That's
And then they
right.
need more arms. I mean, one of
Yep.
those missiles is like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, more than that.
And I've heard that it goes into the millions for some of the fancy ones.
Correct.
I mean, this is insane and ridiculous. And that's what war is. War is, according to Karl Marx, the
Right.
only way that you can survive in an industrial modern economy, because the
Right.
power of industrial machines and mass production
Hmm.
is so great that you're going to be producing far more than the average person could ever consume.
Sure.
So you have to have a method of artificial consumption in order to maintain capitalism and the what we
Right.
call the industrial revolution. So you have to
Right.
have a black hole to sink
Mhm.
the products of your production into,
Correct.
and that
War is
black
the best way
hole
to do that.
is war.
Mhm.
So any economy based on the industrial revolution, with people in factories and living in cities and producing far more than they could ever consume themselves, the only way you can
Right.
keep that situation going is to have war continuously.
Correct.
And it doesn't have to be in your country, it can be in another country. And of course, the best situation is when you have two industrial countries fighting each other, because then they have to rebuild their factories in order to rearm to fight each other continuously.
That's right. That's right.
Oh my God, what kind of a hell is on this earth?
Oh, well, like that. What you just said led me
Uh huh.
to think about what happened to Afghanistan during the past 30 years.
Right. Well, no,
Afghanistan
Afghanistan.
used to be fairly peaceful, from what
Yep.
I understand.
Yep.
Somebody done something, and it's of course I won't discount or dispute the possibilities of infiltration by the CIA and so on, the three-letter agencies that
Yes.
basically stir up shit, and with all the fightings and so on, they play the hand of selling the army, selling weapons
That's
to the
right.
tribes here and there, training up some mercenaries to do this, do that, keep keep up with the killing based on hatreds
Exactly.
and so-called, and then to the outsiders world they would instructed the mainstream media to say, oh yeah, some religious extremists, blah blah
Yes.
blah, and so on and so forth. It's a it's a proxy
Ah,
war.
that's what I've been thinking of that word proxy war, and I want you to
That's right.
differentiate between direct war and proxy war.
Yes.
Proxy wars are always done in battlefield areas where there's no much infrastructure, where the people are mostly illiterate, where they don't
That's right.
have industrial production capabilities. Usually, these places do have raw materials.
That's right.
In other words, there's something worth fighting for. There's something worth
Correct.
exploiting. And remember, when you're dealing with the cabal, there's always something worth exploiting, even if they don't have natural resources.
Of
They'll just take their
course.
kids.
Of
They'll take
course.
their
Now,
women.
if you allow me to jump
Okay.
crazily,
No, not yet. Give me a
okay?
second more.
Sure. Okay, thanks. You,
So
you
there's
go
two
ahead.
there's two kinds of war. There's direct wars in between industrial or developed people, and those are the most dangerous because the technology is involved, right? So you have a
Right.
World War One, a World War Two, or in a case where both sides have equally destructive technologies, you can't have a direct war. And that's what the
Yes.
Cold War was all about. You cannot have a direct war because you have nuclear weapons, okay? So then we've moved into the field of proxy wars. Now, there's always been proxy
Right.
wars in the past, but now they're
Oh
the
yeah.
only wars we can have. And
Right.
that's why Ukraine is a proxy war. And that's why
Mhm.
every war in the modern era, since World War
Since World
II,
War
has been
Two,
a proxy war because
has
it's
been a
very
proxy war.
profitable. You get your proxies on both sides to fight and
That's
kill
right.
and hate each other. While you're
Correct.
supplying the industrial powers behind those proxies are supplying the means
Yep.
of
Yep.
destruction. Now I
Exactly.
like that phrase because instead of the means of production, it's the means of
Yes.
destruction.
That's right. So proxy war, if memory serves, the Korean War is a proxy war.
Absolutely right.
And then, of course,
Remember, the Korean War is fought mostly in the south.
the initial phase
Yep.
of the Vietnam War is also a proxy war.
And
But
beautiful
then it quickly
examples.
deteriorated and eroded to become a real thing.
Beautiful
Understand?
examples. Korean War, let's start there. Mostly
Yes,
fought in the south, which is an
that's right.
agricultural place with almost zero industrial capacity.
Correct.
The north of Korea, where very little fighting took place,
Yes,
was the industrial powerhouse built by
that's right.
Japan. Okay, they didn't
That's
destroy
right.
those factories during the war.
No, no.
Vietnam, another excellent example. Same thing again.
Yes,
the
Right.
mostly agrarian country.
Mhm.
There's
Right.
there's nothing there that's going to be a threat to any world power. No
That's right.
technology. These people are just have ideology reasons to fight each other, but there's nothing there except natural resources.
Correct.
In the case of Vietnam, I don't know exactly what the natural resources are, except I heard there was a lot of exploitation of the populace, physical.
Yeah, I tend to believe it's an ideology war.
But it doesn't matter because both sides get
Same
to
with Khmer Rouge in
yeah,
Cambodia.
and it doesn't matter because both sides get to make tons of money selling the
That's
weapons that are
right.
being consumed there. Like for example, in Vietnam, it was the Chinese and the Russians who were keeping their
Sure.
industrial megaliths alive,
That's right.
and
That's right.
in the United States wasting countless billions of their armaments. And always there's this theme, this emotional theme of we have to help. We have to help the freedom fighters. We have to help the
Isn't that
patriots. We have to help.
doesn't that sound so familiar?
It does,
You
doesn't it?
know,
And in Ukraine, we have
with
the
this.
same. Oh, we have to help those poor people who are fighting for their
Yeah, we have
freedom.
to
And
help them. We have to, yeah. And then, of course, the so-called, during the last 2 years, is that, yeah, you have to save the grandma. Go take your pookies.
yeah, there will be constant photos of atrocities. There'll be constant photos of operatives dressed up in the enemy's uniforms, committing horrible war crimes in order to get you emotionally upset enough to
Yeah,
donate your money
that's right.
to send guns to Ukraine. Now,
That's
think of
right.
it like this: what kind of a twisted world do we live in, where people are told to send killing weapons of destruction to help somebody? What?
Well,
What kind of a
because
garbage argument is that? If you want to help somebody, you send them food and medicine and education.
that's right.
You don't send them
Exactly.
guns, knives, and explosives. What?
Precisely. Yeah. Yeah. You betcha. Yeah, I
So
agree.
how is this possible? It's possible because of propaganda.
That's
It's
right.
possible because of the control of our minds.
Mechanism.
And
Yep.
you know what? We are so weak and compliant. And so we
Yep.
fall for this again and again. That's the whole
That's
concept of wake up. That's the whole concept of discernment. The whole concept
that's right.
of the current social movement, which is not in control of the governments. It's
Mhm.
called the alternative media. And the whole line there is that people have to start thinking for themselves and
Correct.
not be manipulated to do such obviously evil things
Correct.
anymore.
Correct. Well, okay. Speaking of which, evil things. Okay.
Yes.
Let me lightly touch uh, on the religious side of
Another
things.
mechanism to put us at each other's throats.
That is correct. You see, one thing that I dispute a lot during the early days is that Bibles always preaches us that we're sinners. We have to go,
Yes.
pray for forgiveness, this and that, blah blah
Yes.
blah. You know, on the other hand, here's an interesting part,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Confucius actually, there are some great philosophers back then in China, in
Yes.
ancient China. Confucius actually preaches that when you're first when you first born onto the surface of planet Earth,
Right.
you're literally a blank sheet of paper,
Mm-hmm.
okay? And because of that, you are considered pure,
Right.
clean and pure.
Uh-huh.
So that was the teaching. It's basically nature versus nurture that shapes us over time.
Yes.
Of course, there are, as we go deeper and deeper, we understand there's a little bit more than just that. But let's just go with
Mm-hmm.
the lines of nature versus nurture.
Yes.
But so, it makes me very hard during my early days to accept the fact that, Western religions Americans. They assume us we're born evil, we're born sinners.
Well, this is interesting. When I say yes, I don't agree with Confucius when he says that we're born as a blank slate. I agree with Lao Tzu that
Right.
we are a product of our past as well.
True.
But Confucius didn't believe or didn't think that it was important to include past life influences. He only thought about what's happening in the world today,
He's only thinking of the
the
present.
present tense, and what the politics of
That's
the
right.
situation. So
That's
they
right.
both have points on both sides.
That's right.
But
That's right.
the point, the major thing here is that isn't it a complete overstep
Correct.
to say that we're born in sin?
Yep. Yep. And I always use that as a weapon to go against those hardcore Bible thumpers.
Well, here's a good example. Do you raise your kids by telling them every day that they're evil and that they should
No.
be punished and that they're
No.
bad and they're bad students and they're bad people?
No.
And you're going to
course
beat
not.
you're going to beat them because they need to be corrected. Is that the way to raise a child? Of course not.
Mhm.
But that's not the way that Christianity raises its adherents. It says that you're bad, you're evil, you have to, be punished and be, corrected in your thinking and your behavior, and even from the earliest age where you haven't done any behavior yet.
Right. That's right.
Now, this is the most, and again,
Diabolical.
yeah, diabolical and nefarious concept ever created in the minds of humans. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and of course, I'm
Yes,
probably going
sure.
to get shot on the street if anybody knows my address for saying that any religion that tries to put into the mind of a child that they are evil is itself evil.
That's right.
And any belief system that tries to create in the mind of a child that they are somehow responsible for their actions and irresponsible for their actions.
Of course.
They're irresponsible for their actions because they're doing bad things because they're born bad. Well, that's abusive. That's
It
the
is.
most abusive
It
thing I
is.
can think of.
That's right. So, the system has been around shaping us, brainwashing us, conditioning us for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
We have to break out of that
We have to break out of that because really,
at every level. And what you're seeing in the war in Ukraine is
That's
a breaking out of that because it's not financially viable because the money's been turned off. They
That's
can't
right.
get what they need to continue that. Now,
Yes.
back again to World War II. The Germans
Sure.
didn't have that problem.
Correct.
The Germans had money coming out of their noses.
Mhm.
Their pockets were bulging with gold. Their economic means to continue the war was never in doubt. They
Right.
were far richer than the Allies.
Right.
They didn't have to borrow. They'd stolen gold from every national treasury of every country they'd conquered, including Czechoslovakia, France. The Norwegians, who seem to be a little bit brighter than most, managed to smuggle their gold reserves to England at the last moment.
Right.
But everybody else got ripped off, especially the French. I believe the French got some of their gold out, but they lost all their art. And that was soon
Yep.
that was soon sold in New York.
Especially to
Goring.
Goering.
Well, they had so much left over that they, had private collections. But the point is that all of these countries were looted. The big one that we don't talk about was Hungary. The Hungarian Jews were taken for billions, and they even got to the point where they were taking the gold from people's teeth.
Sure.
And it was all getting smelted, turned into gold bars, and deposited at banks in Switzerland. And the Swiss, for some
That's why the Swiss remains as politically neutral throughout the war.
But no, they didn't remain politically neutral. They remained steadfast Nazis, and they just didn't tell anybody.
Oh, okay.
So this is
That
the
I didn't
point.
know.
This is the point. We have to be careful about the words we use.
Right.
The Swiss never for 1 second turned down even one gold bar composed completely of smelted human teeth.
Right.
Now that's a definition of Nazi right there, isn't it?
Sure, you bet.
That's called blood money. Now, I can say that I'm not a criminal, but if I'm accepting money from you to run a drug den and a child
Yeah.
slavery operation in my house that I'm renting to you,
Right.
and then I'm going to say, "Oh, I'm neutral. I'm just renting."
Ah,
Nobody believes that, do they?
right.
So
Right.
Switzerland was basically the control center of the entire Third Reich.
Right.
And all of their high tech equipment that was delicate and was, couldn't be, it wouldn't work if you were dropping bombs. It was all made in Switzerland and shipped across the border.
Mm,
And all the gold that
right.
was plundered from Europe was processed through Swiss banks so that the Germans could continue their war machine. And by the
Mm,
way, Sweden's not far behind for being totally complicit in aiding the Nazis because they were providing all the iron ore, all
that's
the
right.
nickel,
Yeah.
all the other materials that are necessary to keep their war machine going. So see, the problem with history is we don't know anything about the truth.
Correct.
We only know what we've been told
His truth has been distorted every single time.
every single time. Because just like,
It's been rewritten by the victors, not the losers. Okay.
well, just like the king,
That's
the
right.
Henry the Third.
It's just like they portray the emperor, the Roman emperor Nero to be like
He was trying to do reform. He was trying to clean
the
up the
baddest of
slums.
the bad. Yeah, he was a reformer. I
He
know.
was. He was trying to
And it
clean
says
things
he
up.
set the town on fire while
No, there have been constant plagues
playing
in
the
Rome.
fiddle or something like that.
Yeah,
It's like, oh god.
it's all propaganda, and people keep believing
That's
this.
right.
Nero was
I think it was the Roman elites and senators that flipped him.
Well, they didn't like it because what he was doing was not, paying them off correctly, or there was some
That's
financial
right.
reason, or he was from the
Right.
wrong family. See, the other thing that we have to keep in mind is these bloodline families. Now,
Right.
you started off talking about the Medici.
Yeah.
If you really look into where the Medici came from, you'll find that they're Romans.
Mm,
Same families that went undercover for several hundred years after the
right.
dissolution and the sacking of Rome by the Visigoths and
Right.
all that. They were
Right.
hiding out there with their gold stash,
Right.
just waiting to come in and take over and regain
Mm,
power when the time was right. So when you see the
sure.
Renaissance, what you're seeing really is the resurgence of the Roman Empire. And when
Oh, correct.
and when you see the Vatican, and when you see Catholicism, what you're seeing is a resurgence of the religion of the Roman Empire
Hmm.
in a different
More
form.
of the controlling mechanism of the
Sure.
Roman Empire.
And remember,
Yes,
they don't care whether it's one god, 10 gods, whether they
that's
change
right.
the name from Zeus to
That's right.
something else. That's not important. What's
Hmm.
important is that they have control over the minds of the people. And if they're going to use a
Correct.
religion,
Correct.
any religion will do. And if they're
Correct.
going to use money,
Yeah.
then they're going to do that because there's people that would sell out their own mothers for money.
Yep. That's right.
And there are people who would sell their own children for money.
Of course. Of
And as
course.
long as you have people like that in this world, then you can do anything you want with money, can't you?
Hmm. Hmm.
In other words, you destroy, you can pillage, you can invade, you can cause war, you can take and control, and that is the aim of those who use these control mechanisms in their evil ways.
Sure.
And I believe that we're at the end of that
Hmm.
system right now.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
falling apart.
Hmm. Hmm. Hey, let's change. If you don't mind changing the subject a little bit, you said there's something